for College. I'm Carl Gordon, the Assistant Director for Advising here at the University of Houston. And we're going to wait about another 30 seconds or so before we actually get started. We have 30 minutes for this session, so hopefully I've got a lot of information to present. But after that, hopefully we'll have a few minutes for some questions. So if you're familiar with the chat option with the Zoom, then please go ahead and use that. And happy Halloween. I hope the day has been going well for everybody. I know it's kind of different in this age with all these virtual presentations, so maybe we're kind of getting used to that now. All right, so according to my watch, it's been about 30 seconds, maybe a little fast, but like I said, there's a lot of information, so I want to go ahead and get through the presentation. So again, what I wanted to talk about in this presentation, you give me just a second, is basically we're going to talk about what financial aid is, what types of financial aid are available, how is financial aid for your student calculated, how to apply, focus a little bit on scholarships here at the University of Houston, talk about a federal law called the Federal Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act, or FERPA, and then again, if we have questions or time for questions, I'll be glad to answer those for y'all. So the first thing, definition is, what is financial aid? We define financial aid as any type of financial assistance, whether it's federal, state, institutional, or private, provided to students to help fund their college educations. So there are different types of financial aid, and they are basically listed here. We talk about scholarships as financial aid. It's mostly awarded based on students' merit. Then we have grants. Again, they are awarded from the federal government, the state of Texas, and the college or universities. These are what we call need-based awards. There are also student loans. Obviously, if you are borrowing money through a student loan, it must be repaid. Under the student loan programs, there is a need and a non-need-based program. A third type of financial aid program is work study or student employment. We provide your student with work experience. And again, it is one of the need-based programs. And then finally, we have what we call third-party waivers, which basically assist students with tuition payments. So how do you apply for the various financial aid programs? Well, every student and at least one parent, if you're a dependent student, should first create a federal student aid ID at fsa.ed.gov. Also, there's going to be probably some screens that y'all may want to take a picture of, so I hope you have your cell phones ready. I'll kind of say, I think this is a good one to take, but you can take as many as you want, or none if you don't either. But you first, to go through the application process, you create your FSA user ID and password. This is what you actually use to log into the site to fill out the application and to also electronically sign the application. So that's a very important first step. Then when you're ready to start completing the FAFSA application, which is the free application for federal student aid, you'll go to studentaid.gov. Now the FAFSA is an annual application, so it opens October 1st of each year. So we are already 31 days into the FAFSA for the fall of 2021 and spring of 22. So I hope most, if not all of you, have already started the application or have not completed it. It is what we call using prior year income. So when you're filling out the FAFSA, you're going to be asked to provide income information from your 2019 income tax return. During the application process, when you get to those income questions, we strongly encourage families to use what's called the data retrieval tool, or the DRT. There are a series of questions on the FAFSA that will determine whether you qualify to use the DRT or not. But if you do qualify to use the DRT, it makes it so much easier to complete the FAFSA and reduces errors. It basically allows you to exit the FAFSA. You'll go right to the IRS website securely, confirm that that's what you want to do, and then it'll pull your income information and answer most, but not all of the income questions. So if you use the DRT, that's a really good way to save time. After the FAFSA is completed and submitted, students and parents should review the output document, which is called a student aid report. That's going to be either an attachment to or a link on the email that the student will receive from the federal government after they've successfully completed and processed the FAFSA application. About 30% of students nationwide will be selected for a process called verification. Verification means that students and parents must provide any requested or additional documents to the school, and we ask in a timely manner. These documents are usually either copies of those tax returns, signed and dated. We also have a sheet where we may have to verify the total number of household members reported and the number of family members reported on the FAFSA, so it's called a verification worksheet. If you are being asked to do verification, that information will be presented to the student on the student aid report as well. So that's another important thing to look for when you review that output document. Again, we advise students to start early, don't procrastinate. Financial aid offices always experience high volumes of calls, emails, and visits, whether it's in person or virtual during the summer months. So again, we strongly encourage all students to have already started the application process, if not finished, definitely by our priority deadline, which is January the 15th. So how is the eligibility for your student calculated? Well, the purpose of the FAFSA is to calculate or determine a family's expected family contribution, or the EFC. The EFC is what the family should have available through its own resources to apply towards the educational costs of the student. The financial aid office, what we do is we calculate the cost of attendance, or the COA, and that includes mandatory tuition and mandatory fees, books and supplies, and financial aid also helps students and families with living expenses, including room and board, transportation, and personal and miscellaneous expenses. There are different types of living expenses. If your student will be staying on campus, there's one for living on campus. If your student will be living off campus, maybe in an apartment with a roommate, there's another cost of living expense for that. And finally, if your student will be living at home still and commuting, then there is another budget for that. So we do allow for all these line items when we're calculating your student's eligibility. Now, when we talk in financial aid, we always talk a lot about financial need. So what I like to do is just say what need is. So the financial need of a student is a pretty simple mathematic equation. It's determined by subtracting the expected family contribution from the cost of attendance. So in the example that you see here, we say that the cost of attendance could be $20,000. And remember, financial aid is an annual application. So when we process an application, we are talking about a fall semester and a spring semester. So the cost is $20,000. You've done your FAFSA, and the expected family contribution that's come back from the FAFSA is at $5,000. So when you subtract $5,000 from $20,000, the student has demonstrated financial need of $15,000. Depending on the timing of the FAFSA submission, our job and our goal is to provide this student with as much financial need as possible, up to the $15,000 mark with need-based aid. I'm going to shift now a little bit to scholarships, because that's basically a very hot topic item all the time. Here at the University of Houston, our merit-based scholarships is what we're going to be talking about. Our primary merit-based scholarship is what we call the academic excellence scholarships. The student doesn't have any other application to fill out except for their admissions for application, or their admission application, excuse me, because that's what we use to select our students for this scholarship. With COVID-19, it's changed a little bit, but your student has to have applied for admission for the fall semester immediately graduating from high school. They have to submit either the Apply Texas or the Common App by November the 1st, which is tomorrow. And then by Friday, November 6th, your student will have to submit the application fee for that application, the high school transcript, and test score if it was applicable, again, by November the 6th. If your student is submitting their admission application without a test score, our admissions office is going to notify those students of a need to submit an essay and resume. Those notifications should start going out November the 9th, and then they'll be due back to the university by November the 20th. In addition to these merit-based scholarships, we also have a couple of other ways students can apply for scholarships. Of course, we have departmental scholarships. Students are encouraged to check with the college of their student's major to determine eligibility. I'd say most of the scholarships, as far as departmental, may require an established grade point average. So your student may not be eligible for these scholarships as an entering freshman. So once they complete their fall semester, they definitely need to be talking to someone in their department about departmental scholarships. They may be able to apply in the spring semester. or they may have to wait till after their first year is completed before the department will consider the established grade point average at that point in time. There are also outside scholarships. We encourage students and families to look out at different private resources. We often advise students to look everywhere, but to shop local. We have found that a lot of our students have great success by contacting agencies and companies here in the Houston area. Particularly, they kind of want to tend to help students that are going to schools here in Houston. So that can be very helpful, excuse me, a way to get additional outside scholarships. Also, once your students begins his or her classes, there is an icon in their self-service account, which is called Scholarship Universe. And those are basically going to be a list of all these external scholarships that we've been contacted about. So students will be able to get in touch directly with those scholarship companies and be able to get applications and stuff like that. So but it's not until your student has started classes. So again, we are talking for later in the year when they will have access to Scholarship Universe. So now we're going to shift about another type of financial aid program called grants. Again, the application is just the FAFSA application. These are always need-based. Remember, going back to the example, we have or get grant funding from the federal government, the state of Texas, and the institution itself. And on the slide that you see right now, they're just basically the different grant programs that we can offer your student. All right, now I want to shift over to what we call the work-study program. We have, these are funded from the federal government in the state of Texas. If your student, when they're filling out the application, the FAFSA, there's one question on the FAFSA that asks them if they are interested in the college work-study program. If you're not sure or you don't know what it is, I encourage students to just answer yes to that question, because a student who answers yes is going to automatically be considered for work-study from our funding sources. So it just turns out that a lot of times we get students who come in later saying, hey, I didn't know what work study was, or I didn't understand the question. Can I be awarded work study now? And the answer is potentially yes, but we would have to have a student put on a wait list. So you would be able to contact us at the address that you see now to have your student be put on the work study wait list if they weren't initially awarded the college work study program. And so again, on that question on the FAFSA, strongly encourage your student to answer yes to that question. The way the program works is students work up to about 20 hours a week around their class schedule. So they learn not only great skills, not just the work, but they learn about getting a paycheck, having a supervisor, having co-workers. This is the one and only financial aid program where your student is going to receive a bi-weekly paycheck. These are going to be sent directly to the student. All other financial aid is applied directly to what we call your student's account. So if there's grants, scholarships, or loans, all that money is applied to your student account first. And then if there's money left over, then it's refunded to the student. But a student who's on the college work study program will get, just like I said, the check directly paid to him or her twice a week. So if your student was interested in work study, answered the question yes on the FAFSA, but was not awarded work study, or maybe wasn't eligible, there are other opportunities on campus for students who are interested in working while they're going to school. We partner with our career services department to help students find employment through these through career services. So again, if your student is still interested in employment opportunities but wasn't eligible for work study, they would be referred to the career services department to help them find other work opportunities that aren't need-based or through the work study program, and there are plenty of those. All right, now I'm going to go ahead and talk a little bit about loans. And again, there's no separate application other than the FAFSA. So for your student, there's basically what we call the federal direct loan program. There's a subsidized and an unsubsidized version of the loan. If it's a subsidized direct loan that we're offering your student, that means that the interest on this loan is being paid while your student is in school, taking at least 6 credit hours. If your student is offered the subsidized and the unsubsidized loan is exactly like the subsidized as far as interest rates, repayment provisions, and stuff like that, with one exception, and that's the interest. When does the interest begin to be charged on an unsubsidized loan? And that's from day one. So on a subsidized loan, there's no interest on that loan while the student is going to school for at least 6 hours. And then following the first 6 months after your student is no longer enrolled, taking the 6 hours. On an unsubsidized loan, the student is responsible for paying the interest from the time we apply the loan to the student account. Now, if you pursue the unsubsidized loan, you do have another option. You can say you either want to make the payments while your student is going to school, or you can defer the interest payments until the student goes into deferment. And what happens there is that when your student officially goes into repayment, which again is 6 months after they're no longer enrolled at least 6 hours, the government does something called capitalization. And capitalization is basically taking all of that interest that's been accruing on that loan from the date of advance to that point of repayment, and then they put that accrued interest into the loan. So at that point in time, the loan is inflated because of the interest that's been added to it. So that's kind of a discussion and an option if you're going to pursue the unsubsidized loan that you probably need to have before you make that decision, or as part of that decision-making process. The interest rate is established like at the end of June of each year. Some really good news as far as student loans are concerned. The current interest rate on this particular loan program is 2.75%. So it'll be a 2.75% loan for this fall semester into the spring semester and through the summer months. In June of 2021, the federal government will recalculate the interest rate again for when your student's starting school in the fall. And as I mentioned, as I was talking about them, repayment on these student loans begins 6 months after your student is no longer enrolled at least half-time. And we're all shooting for that point where it's graduation. So when your student graduates or is really not enrolled for 6 hours, they may have to withdraw or something during their academic career. When we understand that happens. So at that point, that's when that 6-month grace period clicks in. And then month number 7 is when the student goes into official repayment. There are a couple of other alternatives in the loan sector. If your, again, student is considered a dependent student for financial aid purposes, you as a parent would be able to apply for a Parent Plus loan. The Plus loan stands for a parent loan for undergraduate students. You would apply for it at the website here called studentaid.gov. There is a credit check on it. They don't do a check against your credit score, but you have to demonstrate some level of credit worthiness. You are the parent are the borrower on behalf of the student, and you then therefore are responsible for the payment if it's approved. If your Plus loan application is not approved or it's denied, then your student will be eligible for additional unsubsidized loans in his or her name. We also can talk a little bit about private or alternative loans. Most of these loans are offered to students. The student applies online with the lender of their choosing. There is a credit worthiness part of this loan application process. So if your student doesn't have established credit yet, he or she can apply for these private loans with a credit-worthy co-signer. Once that loan is approved by that private lender, they will send it to our office for what we call certification or processing. And depending again on when you submit those applications, has a huge impact on when those funds are made available to the student. Kind of like again with the FAFSA, you should be applying for those probably at the beginning of summer, intending to use them for the fall semester. There are also some programs called state exemptions. These are offered by the state of Texas. They're available to Texas residents attending a public college or university in Texas. They can cover the full tuition and or tuition and mandatory fees. Some examples of these exemptions are for adopted students and former students in the foster care system, educational aides, class valedictorians, if you are a blind or a deaf student, if you are children of disabled or deceased law enforcement officers. These are just a few examples. So there are so many others. And each of those waivers or exemptions has a separate application. So this is definitely a screen you probably want to take a shot of where it says thecollegeforalltexans.com for a complete list of those exemptions. So a little bit now, one thing I really didn't mention, but if on the FAFSA application, you have to be either a US citizen or an eligible non-citizen, like a permanent resident. So if you are an international student or an undocumented student who has established Texas residency, you can complete the Texas application for state financial aid or a TASFA. If you're here at the University of Houston, you complete your TASFA online, and there again is the website for that. So if you're not eligible to fill out a FAFSA, but you can fill out a TASFA, make sure you can take a picture of that one as well. It's an online application here at the University of Houston. At other institutions in the state of Texas, it could be a manual process where you have to fill out the paper application. That application is available at the College for All Texans website as well. It's the same tax year when you fill out the TASFA as it was for the FAFSA. So for the upcoming year, it's going to be the 2019 taxes. And so again, the verification of that information can be required. but basically a student who is eligible to fill out a TASFA application is applying for the Texas grant, the Texas Public Education Grant, Texas Work Study, and then a state loan called the College Access Loan. But they would also be able to borrow through other private loans like the ones we were talking about. But if you're not a U.S. citizen or eligible non-citizen under the private loans, you're probably going to have a credit-worthy U.S. citizen or permanent resident. So I'm kind of like getting close to the end of the information. So what I'd just like to do is some helpful hints for you to maximize your potential eligibility for receiving financial aid. Again, it's apply as soon as possible after October the 1st. Our priority deadline date is January 15th of 2021. So between then, those 2 dates is the best time to apply and fill out your FAFSA application. Remember, for those merit-based scholarships, please have applied for admission by November the 1st, which again is tomorrow. Don't put the wrong tax year information, because in financial aid, what we're using is called prior year. So we are going back 2 years for taxes. So we don't want the 2020 tax information. We want your tax information from 2019. If your student is selected for verification, and again, that's, like I said, about 30% of them, that means that we're going to have additional information. We would like that information as soon as possible as well, as close to January the 15th, if at all possible. If your student can get your application in, whether it's just the FAFSA or the FAFSA and the verification documents by January the 15th, that's going to maximize their potential to get our grant funding, because grants are, except for the federal Pell Grant, is limited. So we award students on a first come, first served basis. And so students who apply later or provide the additional documentation later get pushed down that list, if you will. So again, it's really, really important to maximize the grant aid potential for your student, that you apply early between October 1st, January 15th. And if selected for verification, you get us those documents as well too. On the scholarship search, like I said, it's a nonstop continual search. When your student does get access to the scholarship universe, there'll be a lot more information that's available to him. But again, you can use the public sites to check out for scholarships. Just be careful too, because sometimes if you're looking for outside scholarships and someone is saying, hey, we'll award your student scholarship, but we want either your credit card number or your bank account number or your social security number, we strongly encourage, when you start hearing those kinds of questions, to stay away from those agencies, because that doesn't sound like the right thing to be asking for when you're trying to help students and families get scholarship dollars. The last thing I wanted to bring up, because this happens a lot, not just in financial aid, but in what we call student services or enrollment services, it's the federal law called the Family Educational Right and Privacy Act. It protects the privacy of your student education records. So once your student either submits the admission application or FAFSA application, enrolls in classes or whatever it may be, those records become protected under this law. Now, we understand as parents, you have a vested interest in what's happening with your student. This is their first time in college, so they may not understand the process, and so we understand that. But for us to be able to speak with anyone else other than the student, they have to have submitted the FERPA release form. It's on your student's self-service account, and basically they will identify the person or persons with whom we can have those conversations, and they'll also create a passcode or password that we will use to confirm the identity of the person that we're speaking with. And so again, when you have those conversations or when you're going through these processes, you might want to make sure that your student has filled out that FERPA release form. So that's really all I wanted to share with you today, but if we have time, and I think that we have a few minutes, if there's anyone that has questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Carl, thank you so much. All that
Sure.
information is really, really helpful, I know, for a lot of people. And the chat has just been going the entire time.
Good.
A lot of questions are about the Cougar Promise. We have a lot of students who are really interested in that. Are you able to explain that maybe
Sure,
a little bit more detail?
Sure, I can talk a little bit about the Cougar Promise. So again, you need to have been admitted and filled out your FAFSA by January the 15th. Okay, so then if your family income is up from 125,000 below, there's like two levels. There's between 0 and 65,000 and 65,001 up to the 125. We're going to be able to help your student with the tuition and fees through grant funds. So basically, if you meet those deadlines, Cougar Promise will make sure that your student up to the 65,000 point will have their tuition and fees covered, between 65,001 and 125, there will be some grant or tuition assistance through the Cougar Promise program. So just make sure that you've been admitted by the 15th of January and that you filled out your FAFSA by that same date.
Great. Thank you so much for going
Sure.
into that a little bit more, Carl.
My
There's
pleasure.
also another question. What about, we do have some transfer students that are on the session, and so some of them are referring to the scholarships and grants that maybe they are getting at their current institution, and whether those will transfer over to UH when they may be planning to transfer. Can you talk about that process and what that looks like?
Sure. If it's a scholarship from an institution, depending again, unless it's a sister institution, but if it's if it's local money, meaning it's that school's money, they usually don't transfer it out. But if it's coming from a private donor, then I would think that yes, those scholarships can transfer from one college to another. You probably just need to have a conversation with the donor to say, hey, I'm going to be transferring to the University of Houston. Will this scholarship follow me? We also, just real quick here, we do have a transfer scholarship for students. Again, if basically you transfer in with at least 58 credit hours and have a 3.0 transfer GPA, then you're automatically considered for our Transfer Excellence Scholarship.
Great. And I believe kind of one of the last questions that we're kind of looking at is, you know, us being virtual, we've had the honor of hosting a lot of our out-of-state students that normally wouldn't be able to join us in person for Cougar Preview.
Sure.
So some of them are asking about the out-of-state opportunities. So we know that a lot of these scholarships and the Cougar Promise and other things may be just for in-state students, but are you able to touch upon what may be available for out-of-state students in the forms of scholarships and financial aid?
What I'd just like to say there about that is that if any non-resident student can qualify for a competitive academic scholarship for at least $1,000, that should qualify you to pay the in-state tuition rates. So we just have to, whenever it is, if we're talking about scholarships specific, kind of figure out if it's a competitive academic scholarship for at least, and of course being at least $1,000.
Right. Okay. So out-of-state students, there you go. That's one of the ways in which you may be able to get some in-state tuition and some in-state scholarships by being eligible for one of those competitive academic scholarships for the University of Houston. Awesome. Well, Carl, thank you so much. We really appreciate it. Really appreciate everything. Everyone who's on the call still, please see the contact information that you have here on the screen. That's the 1010 number that is very known and common for a lot of our enrollment services offices, but the scholarships and financial aid are option 5. UH.edu/SFA stands for Student Financial Aid. And then also they have an email address. And I think it's also important to answer, Carl, your office in financial aid doesn't necessarily handle any residency documents or anything. That would be the registrar, correct?
That's correct. For the TASL, we're going to look for the that residency affidavit, but we usually partner with our colleagues there in the office of the university registrar.
Great.
And just real quick side note, those academic excellence scholarships and transfer excellence scholarships, those would qualify non-resident for in-state tuition.
There you go. Super great information. Carl Gordon, Assistant Director of Financial Aid, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it. And everyone, you're moving on to your student breakout session. So you have quite a few to choose from Honors College to Get Involved panel and many, many more. So please go check out that website and move into those links starting right at 1:30. So you've got a little bit of a 2-minute break. Thank you so much to everyone, and we'll see you very soon, okay? Bye.